Hello and a very warm welcome to the International Conference on Financing. It's a great pleasure to have you with us. Now let me start by the words of wisdom Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, used in his prayer. As you may well know, it's quite common to actually quote this prayer at the beginning of talks or presentations. Now the prayer reads, "Oh my God, expand me my breast, ease my task for me, and remove the impediment from my speech," so I can get across my point. Now, I'm thoroughly delighted to be here with you today, and before I begin, I'd like to, at the very outset, extend my sincerest thanks and appreciations to all the lecturers, panelists, presenters, and of course, our knowledgeable participants. I'd also like to thank all the organizers, and of course, my colleagues at the SEO who've put lots of efforts into holding this conference. Over the course of the next 15 or 20 minutes, I'll be talking about the latest developments in financing, particularly when it comes to financing through the capital market. And of course, we'll be talking about the steps that we are planning to take at the SEO, which is the sole regulatory body of the Iranian capital market. Now, as you know, when we look at the two sectors of the economy, the real sector and the financial sector, it's fair to say that normally the real sector is associated with production, economic output, and is represented by the economic segments that are essential to the growth of the GDP. But it's also important to remember that the real sector generates much better outcomes if accompanied with a healthy financial system. And I think it's fair to say that there is a positive correlation between the economic growth and capital formation. Now, whether through the banking system or through the capital market, it's very important that there is a sound, fair, transparent, and well-functioning regulatory environment. I believe transparency in the market, coordination and close communication with all the stakeholders, including, of course, investors, issuers, market participants, members of parliaments, and, of course, fellow financial regulators and the state are central to a clear understanding of the regulatory body's activities and priorities, including, of course, contemplated rulemakings for capital formation through the market. Now, I'm sure you know that Iran's economy is bank-based, at least for the moment. Its capital market has, in recent years, assumed a much higher profile, particularly in terms of its potential to provide financing, both in the primary as well as in the secondary markets. And that's mainly due to the fact that the banks were already struggling to keep up with the demand for loans. And probably the second point is that the money market is normally associated with the mission of providing short-term financing to enterprises. So that's probably one side of the coin, but there is also a number of developments that I'd like to mention in 2020, which made a great impact on our capital market as we see today. We had the influx of liquidity into our capital market by retail investors and the consequent sharp ascent of the indices. We had, a very important probably development was making justice shares available. And they were available, but making them tradable in the market. And that, I think, was a very important development because justice shares were already there and they were already allocated to millions of Iranians, tens of millions of Iranians, but they were not tradable. But in 2020, we made them tradable, and that was, I think, a very important development, which increased the number of our investors, as was mentioned in the remarks of our chairman, to around 50 million investors. So that was a very important development in 2020. We had the increase of free float shares. We saw the launch of the first public ETF. And there were also certain issues, I've got to admit, around the launch of the second ETF and certain probably miscommunications which created panic in the market. And of course, there were lots of other developments which triggered a trend that has never been experienced in our capital market. Now, despite all the ups and downs in 2020, the SEO took meaningful steps besides stabilizing the market to facilitate capital formation and to reduce regulatory burdens on securities issuance, both on equity and debt. And that was while it tried to maintain and in certain cases enhance investor protection. And I think that's, of course, as you know, one of the main responsibilities of any regulator, and we are the SEO, of course, there's no exception here as well. Now, when it comes to supporting and financing corporations, the capital market has got a lot to offer in assisting the market participants. And I just want to mention a couple of them. The first point that I'd like to draw your attention to, and I'll be catching up on that later also, is the laws and regulations which support investors. And there are basically two specific pieces of regulation ratified in 2005 and 2009. We'll be talking about that later. But they actually made a great impact on the current status of our market. Another point is the infrastructure for using the new technologies in our market. I think it's fair to say that the space at which technology is moving forward is really very fast, and everybody, including the regulators, are trying to doing whatever it takes to basically keep up with that sort of pace. Be it the technologies around DLT, ML, AI, and also when it comes to fintech, suptech, regtech. So these are all the technological advancements that we see happen in the market. And I think we, as the regulatory body, we need to do whatever it takes to be in line with those technological developments. Of course, we've got to be very careful that while we are technology neutral, we have to be very careful about the risks associated to that, because investor protection at the end of the day is one of our most important responsibilities. Now, capital distribution through large and liquid markets, pricing of financial claims, for instance, through commodity exchanges. You know, we've got two commodity exchanges, Iran Mercantile Exchange and Iran Energy Exchange, and we'll come to that later. Various instruments for financing and hedging with the possibility of expansion, and finally, financial incentives to those who want to operate in our capital market. So that's another point that I wanted to raise. You know, we've got in our capital market 4 exchanges. We've got 2 securities exchanges, i.e. Tehran Stock Exchange and Iran Faro Bourse. And we've got 2 commodities exchanges, Iran Mercantile Exchange and Iran Energy Exchange. And just to give you a figure, to give you a sort of probably a better view, a helicopter view of how these markets actually stand. I remember that last year we were talking about the trade value of our Iran Mercantile Exchange, and analysts were actually comparing the trade value at IME to a percentage of the country's GDP. So that basically demonstrates the scale and the magnitude of the trade value of our exchanges. So I just want to say that our capital market at the moment is in a status that we never saw any time before. Now, I'd like to also talk about our mission and then tell you what we can offer based on those 3 missions that we've got. I've already mentioned protecting investors. Then we have another, axis of that mission, which is enhancing, maintaining, and of course, developing transparent, fair, orderly, and efficient and effective markets. And of course, we need to do whatever it takes to make sure that enforcement is actually there as effectively as possible. And there are a number of initiatives that basically are the regulator of the capital market and the Securities and Exchange High Council have taken to promote a capital formation through the market. And I'd like to mention all those points a bit later. But before I do so, I'd like to draw your attention to a number of market solutions that we've actually offered when it comes to capital formation. The first point is the issuance of securities in Iran's financial markets. And you've got to know that the issuance of securities in our capital market, and here I'm talking about the Islamic products, because when it comes to conventional products, there is another, that's another question. But let's focus for a moment on our Islamic products. And I want to give you an example, and I want to mention a date, which is a very special date, and that date is 1994. In 1994, our central bank issued the first certificate of participation, or Musharaka Sukuk. And remember, Sukuk issuance took off in 2000, but the date I just gave you is 1994. So it demonstrates that when it comes to issuance of Sukuk, the Iranian financial system was a pioneer. And as I mentioned, the central bank actually issued the first certificate of participation, and that was a municipal security which amounted to around $428 million at a time. Now, however, since that time, lots of developments have been witnessed, and when it comes to the legal side of it, we've had two very important pieces of regulation. The first is the Securities Market Act, is actually the Securities Market Act, SMA, and that was in 2005. And then we had subsequently the enactment of the law for development of new financial instruments and institutions. We normally call it the development law. So in 2005 and 2009, two very important pieces of regulations being enacted in the Iranian capital market, which dramatically changed the whole picture in our market. New instruments and institutions have been actually introduced, which were mainly focused on capital formation. Now, since 2009, Sukuk issuance and establishment of collective investment funds, CIS or actually funds, have played a critical role in financing companies. Now, the first Ijara Sukuk, for instance, issued. We're not talking about books, we're talking about instruments. Right, the first Ijara Sukuk was issued in 2011 in capital market by Mahan Air. Mahan Air is one of the Iranian airlines, as originator, amounting to $281 million. Now, since then, SEO's Sharia Committee has ratified a wide array of Sukuk structures. We've got MBS, mortgage-backed securities, Murabaha Sukuk, Manfa'a Sukuk, and many others, particularly Islamic treasury bills. And I'd like to talk about this very important instrument. You know, when it comes to Islamic treasury bills, I think it's fair to say that that was one of the instruments which really helped the government manage its debts. And that was one of the instruments which drew lots of attention at the time. And as we speak, Islamic treasury bills are being issued because it's proved to be a very effective instrument when it comes to managing the debt of the government. And just a few words about our Sharia Committee. You know, the Sharia Committee was first established in the, in the capital market by the SEO. Of course, at the moment, we have also a Sharia Committee at the central bank. Our Sharia Committee is very active. They are involved in developing, structuring, and also when it comes to actually implementing those instruments, the Sharia Committee is there. They normally have 2 meetings a month, and I have to say they are very active. They're proactive, and they actually have lots of items on the agenda, particularly to make sure that new instruments which are Sharia compliant are offered and are also implemented in the market. So as I said, their role is not just in the structuring of those instruments, but also when it comes to implementing those instruments in the market. So together with our Sharia Committee, we managed to actually issue all types of sukuk, and probably we are one of the few countries across the globe whose actually capital markets is 100% Islamic. So it's not a dual system where you have a conventional part and Islamic part. We believe that our capital market is 100% Islamic, and that's probably one of the reasons that Muslims across the globe, as well as non-Muslims who are interested in the Islamic financial products, are attracted to our market. Now, as for the CIS, a major development is also observable. Today, there are more than 280 funds composed of open-end stock funds, fixed income funds. We have balanced or mixed funds and dedicated market-making funds valued at $96 billion. In addition, there are a number of closed-end funds, including private equity funds, venture capital funds, project funds, and construction funds. Now, in order to facilitate capital formation, we need to understand complexities and burdens in the capital market. We often hear from people who are operating successful companies and investment operations that are overwhelmed by the complexity of our securities laws and processes. And I think that's something which is very important and something that has drawn our attention, and we've tried to actually ease that sort of problem. The different paths to raising capital can be daunting for those unfamiliar with the market. So developing financial institutions which particularly help facilitate the formation of capital through the capital market, I think, is a task that we have to take care of. And establishment of investment bank, credit rating agencies, these are two of the initiatives that we've taken. At the moment, we've got 10 investment banks in our capital market, and we've got a couple of credit rating agencies. And later on, I'll be talking about credit rating agencies, but that's something that didn't exist in our market. 6 years ago, there were no credit rating agencies, but now we have a couple of them up and running. And later on, I'll tell you about one of the developments which very much has to do with what one of those rating agencies did just a couple of months ago. Now, in 2020, the SEO and the Securities and Exchange High Council, as I mentioned, the Securities and Exchange High Council is the body that is responsible for the overall policy making of the capital market. The daily operations is actually carried out by the SEO, the regulatory body. Now, those two bodies introduce a number of initiatives, and I'd like to refer to those initiatives, and I hope you find them useful when it comes to our topic, which is capital formation. One of them was the increase in the number of IPOs in the capital market. In 2020, the number of IPOs increased to 39, around 40, which is 15% actually higher in comparison to the previous year. And the second point, which is the point that I really like, because I felt it firsthand when the first credit rating agency was actually licensed by the SEO, is the issuance of rated sukuk without guarantee. One of the problems that probably the commonplace in the capital market was that when you wanted to issue sukuk, normally you needed a guarantor, and that guarantor was a bank. So the banking system would normally come to us and tell us, okay, you're the capital market, but you need a bank to guarantee actually your financial products. So you are involving banks, you're putting the burden on the banks. So 6 years ago, the first couple of credit rating agencies were licensed, and they are JVs with European and Asian countries. And so they were actually there to make sure that with rating those products, those sukuks, then the need for a bank to be the guarantor will be removed. So for the first time in 2020, approximately $167 million Ijara sukuk was issued without guarantee and with a dedicated rate. Although it's the first step, we hope credit rating will affect interest rate of securities, because that was a burden on on us and on the banking system. Of course, it would basically increase the cost of raising finance. So with rating agencies being there up and running and removing the need for a guarantor, I think the cost for raising finance will dramatically decrease. Now, another point that I want to mention, which is in that context, is ratification of criteria for establishing and registering project-oriented corporations. So that happened for the first time in 2020. Now, the laws and regulations governing the establishment and operations of project-oriented corporations is there. These project-oriented corporations were actually introduced because there were certain, I have to say, structural issues with the existing project funds. So we felt the need for project-oriented corporations. And now they are there, hopefully, to facilitate funding of projects. The next point I'd like to draw your attention to is the fact that we gave license to 6 private equity funds. And private equity funds, you know, are gaining in importance in Iran and probably also elsewhere. And the SEO's board actually bestowed 6 licenses for establishment of 6 private equity funds worth almost $714 million. Now, these funds will contribute to the capital formation of joint stock companies and limited liability companies, and of course prepare them for being offered in the capital market at a later stage. And of course, enactment of a new law for raising capital, which was enacted by the Parliament, the law for additional paid-in capital for corporations, in which companies can fuel new flow of liquidity in their operation. That was another development and another initiative taken jointly by the SEO and the SEO's High Council. Now, in conclusion, before I finish off, I'd like to tell you that the SEO is there for you to do whatever it takes to facilitate the process of capital formation. We believe we need your valuable comments, ideas, and suggestions because it's actually like a family of the capital market participants. And I think there is a general recognition at the SEO that we need to go forward together with our partners, whether national or international, to be able to be an effective, responsible, and responsive regulator. Now, I think that's all the time I've got for the moment. I'd like to thank you very much again for having taken the time to actually participate in this international conference, although online. I very much look forward to the possibility of meeting you all in person, hopefully soon. Thank you again for your time today, and enjoy the rest of the conference.